and welcome to People's podcast, Ahead of the Curve. My name is Suhini Wijayasinghe and I'm the Head of HR Solutions here at P2P. In this episode, we're doing something a little different, and I'll be talking to my colleagues today who have joined me in attending the Australian Human Resource Institute's National Convention and Exhibition for 2025. We were really privileged to be able to attend this year, and we learnt a lot from it, and there were some amazing speakers, and we thought, what better way to talk about and discuss this information than to come on our podcast and have a conversation? So I'd like to introduce my colleagues to you. I've got today Leanne Lazarus from our Queensland office, who is the Manager for Specialist Recruitment. And I've also got Kaajal Khelawan, who is our HR Manager and Operations Lead in our HR Solutions team. Welcome onto the podcast.
Thank you.
So we had an amazing time at the convention this week, and I have to say, I think this is probably one of the best conventions that I've gone to, just because of the quality and the depth of some of the keynote speakers, some of the topics that were discussed, and I'm really excited to break down some of the things that we learnt and some of the really interesting content that, full credit to AHRI that they allowed us the opportunity to go beyond just the HR framework and gave us some really interesting food for thought. So a couple of things that I want to go through today is predominantly around that HR framework and the things that we've learned that are, all about AI. I mean, that is quite literally the hot topic at the moment, and, technology and its disruption and how we navigate through change and that really burning topic in the forefront of everyone's mind about flexibility and working from home. But then I also want to give our listeners something that's also for them, and we'll save that little treat for the end, which I think we all also very much enjoyed. So we had some great speakers, and first topic of that convention was disrupt yourself, and that was by Whitney Johnston, who is the CEO and co-founder of Disruption Advisors, and she's a leading figure on organizational change. And wow, so captivating. She was talking essentially about what we need to do to really change things up in ourselves to be able to feed that on to the business or our organization or our teams or our employees, from a small scale to a large scale. And I loved her starting point where she was talking to us about, that journey that she was going on at Machu Picchu and, being terrified about essentially falling off a mountain with her daughter. And there was a statement where, her guide that was, helping them through that process up the mountain was basically said, it's never a problem. It's always about learning. And to me, that was, groundbreaking, because I think we can get really stuck on things being an issue and get really stuck on, I have to fix something immediately, rather than going, this is a learning opportunity. And, it really tied in with the question that she asked afterwards was, and, she provided some statistics on it as well, was, do I need to transform myself to transform my organization? And I think that's a great place for us to start in terms of a conversation and how we felt about that. So, I'll talk about the statistics after, but Kaajal, what do you think about that statement? And where did your brain go when we were asked that question of, do I need to transform myself to transform my organization?
I think that is definitely something that we need to do. Organizations won't change on their own. It comes from us.
Yeah,
changing and driving those new initiatives and innovation and creating new things for us to be able to move forward. I think if we're just continuously stuck that the organization will just change and those things will just happen, they won't happen without people having their input and actually driving us into the future.
Agreed. Leanne, where do you sit with that?
I think when you look at change, change can be complex, it can be quite simple. And you can put a change management plan together, you can put it in place for the organisation in terms of their growth and development. But I think if you look at a lot of CEOs, that's some of their big drivers is that to drive growth and profit, you need to go through change. But sometimes they themselves have to first identify the change that they need to make before they actually roll it out into the business, because you can't expect everyone else to do the change if you're not changing with it. And you've got to have that buy-in and belief in the change that you're bringing in is actually going to add the value.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we look at ourselves as much as we look at the business or the organization or that change process we want to implement.
Yeah. And, I think you hit the nail on the head there, because we, as HR professionals or as a business leader, we're in the nexus of creating change, of creating and contributing positive elements into the business that people may not have thought of before. And, you are the locus of your own experience, so you can get really trapped into your world and think, well, this is what it's got to be, and this is the cookie cutter process. So if you need people to change, I think you need to be uncomfortable with them. And if you're not prepared to be uncomfortable with them, well, then where's the buy-in? So I found that really, really insightful. But, in terms of the statistics, that we're talking about it as if absolutely 100% yes, but really, so Whitney was telling us that pre-COVID, they did, a longitudinal survey of CEOs and business owners, and it was something like 18% of them strongly agreed that they had to transform themselves in order to transform their organization, which is a little diabolical, if I'm going to be honest. And perhaps that's just coming from our own journeys. But then post-COVID, they did the survey again, and it was I don't have the exact figure, but it was well over 70% that I'm confident of. And perhaps we can put the exact figures down the bottom later. But it was a seismic shift, and I think that going through all of that change in COVID was just, it forced us to take a big look in the mirror on what we had to do individually and how we contributed. And I think that ties in a lot with personal disruption is the process of deliberate self-innovation. And that was such a great tagline from Whitney, which is, all about, you can't be asking for people to go on a journey unless you've either been on that journey yourself or you're willing to hold their hand and take them on that journey with you, because you have to be willing to learn and develop and grow. And the second that you sort of sit in that moment going, I have nothing else to learn, you have nothing else to give. Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about was, and unpacking what we learnt, was the importance of, it sounds very deep and meaningful, but I think it's very valuable, about reprogramming our subconscious. And I think this is relevant just for getting work. Like, we don't even have to talk about this on a work lens, when we are committing to improving ourselves or doing something different or being better, we get, trapped with those negative words and those negative emotions. We're human. We do that. That's just the autopilot of our brains in a lot of circumstances. And Whitney was talking about how, the power of words, and that's such a overused phrase, but I love how she broke it down to say, it's about understanding the difference between a noun versus verb. Yeah. And, I think there was, the difference between using the noun and using the verb was the difference of being able to tell yourself that you are capable, to going, you actually have a mountain to climb and you haven't gotten there yet. Was there anything that you took away from that, Kaajal, in terms of, like, for you personally, what that verb was going to look like, or what the difference was?
I think so personally, I think it really resonated with me because I absolutely love using positive affirmations in order to do things. But what I really took away from what she was talking about was, there was a piece where she talked about whatever I am follows you. So whatever you say that you are will follow you. So whether it's a negative tone or it's something that you just say on a negative whim, that follows you. So you really need to affirm from a positive perspective. And I think for us as a business and for me as an individual, it is, I am always learning and I am always open and willing to accept change. I think that's a really big thing, especially when you get stuck into the day-to-day operations and things have been the way they are for a period of time. You're not open to doing something differently. So I think for me, one of the biggest things from this conference that we've learned is about change, and that the willingness and openness to change. Yeah.
And Leanne, what did you think about that?
I think it's just the fact of using those words to really sort of redesign your subconscious, because it takes a lot, and it's not something you can just say once. I think I look at I look at a situation, I always look at the positives and negatives and that what if. And sometimes you can get really over analytical, which sometimes can really take you into the negative component of it. So I think using your words and using it in a positive way, I agree with you there. It can actually help change your mindset, but it doesn't only change your mindset; it changes the culture and environment you bring in those conversations and in those processes, which I think make a huge difference as well.
Yeah. And I think a good one that I heard bouncing around was, it's the difference between saying I want to be a winner to versus I am a winner.
Yeah.
You know, and it sounds so cliched, but it's real, and I think it's far more important outside of work than what it is inside of. It's very important inside of work, but I think in terms of mental health, it's such a big component of our lives these days with a lot of the external stresses that we're going through. That is how we speak to ourselves, particularly when we're going through that disruption, is enormously important. Now, there were a couple of other things that I really wanted to highlight that we got in her keynote speech, and they're like, one is quite a punchline, which I absolutely adore, and I think we should just have it everywhere. Is amateurs compete and professionals create. And I think for anybody that's listening, that's a people manager, or part of their role is to inspire, to lead, to engage. It's not about who wins and who loses and who is better than someone else and where do you tally up in amongst your team, or the arbitrary figure that someone gets in a in a poorly thought out performance review or something. It should be about finding that solution. It should be about creating something new. It should be about being open to someone asking you questions about why you're doing the things in the way that you're doing them. And it's very confronting for people, and myself included. I've been with P2P for a very long time. There are certain things where I know I can get stuck in my ways, and we just do things because I didn't necessarily think outside the box in that moment of time. And one of the things that I always tell someone that's joining my division, on their first day, and we're talking to them, is I need you to tell me if you think you can do something better, because you have a fresh pair of eyes that I don't have anymore. And you are stronger at me than this. In this moment, you have a creativity that is that I need, that is more valuable to me than what I'm bringing to the table. So, that really struck a chord with me about we need, professionals should be here to create something and not be scared about it. The last one I want to hand over to you guys and how you feel about this and whether you think that this is feasible, and whether you and how you think you might embody it if you think it's feasible. So Leanne, when Whitney was leaving the stage, she was talking to us about it's also overwhelming. The change is so big and we have to disrupt ourselves, and we've been given all these things and words of affirmation and yada, 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 and it starts becoming white noise and you start freaking out. 5% better every day. Do you think that's manageable?
Oh, look, I definitely think it is. And because when she was talking about that 5% better each day, I think sometimes we can sort of look at something and go, I've got to solve it right now, or I've got to change it all right now. And, I've always said in the industry, how to eat an elephant, which no one, you don't want to do, but you break it down into chunks. And it's the same thing with that 5% every day. You don't have to reinvent yourself every single day. It's just doing something. Maybe we're doing something a bit smarter, maybe having a conversation that you wouldn't normally have in a better way. It's just looking at how you can improve little things, which eventually will help with the bigger things as well. So I don't think it's unachievable at all. And even for myself, sometimes, you get up and you just have your normal day and you go, I've got my routine, you've got to get up, do X, Y, Z, and then I've got to get to the office, got to do this. Sometimes it's just looking at something through a different lens, making it slightly different, doing it in a different way where, as you say, you can get into a habit of, I've got to go through these 6 tabs, when in actual fact, it's because I've always done those 6 tabs, when in actual fact, you can use 3 tabs and get more time out of your day. It's a 5% improvement.
Agreed. Kaj?
I definitely think 5% is easy to do, and I think it's really important that we start to have these things that we implement into our working lives, because we get so stuck, like Leanne said, into doing things the way that we've been doing them. I think she also talked about she allocates 10 minutes a day purely for writing her book, and it's just 10 minutes. I mean, we have 10 minutes is basically nothing. So, I mean, for me, I think that's really something important for me to implement within myself, but also personally and professionally, because I think we also as leaders need to remember that we set the example and we set the tone.
Yeah.
If you continue the way that you are, your team will not evolve. You will continuously be in the same space that you are. You as a leader need to be uncomfortable, because then people follow what they see. So if you are continuously being a particular type of way, that's what your team's
they're gonna emulate that.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed. And I think, funnily enough, this particular person was a guest on the very first episode of this podcast, Matt Papalo. I remember when I was going through quite a low patch in just motivation to go, and I remember, like, this 5% is exactly what he was talking about in a different way, which is forget about the complexity. Just turn up.
Mm-hmm.
Just turn up and we'll do the fun stuff until you feel it again, or whatever it might be. And it's I think it's just taking that mindset of, you don't have to do everything to perfection all in one go. Sometimes it's just turning up. That's your 5%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just rock up.
Yeah.
Just get some movement happening. Similarly, whether it's in the workplace of, I'm just going to allocate 10 minutes to this particular activity that drives me nuts, but I'm just going to do this every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So the next speaker that we went to see was Kate Bravery, who is the Global Leader of Talent Advisory at Mercer. Big company, holds a lot of data about employment trends and people and work, and they do some amazing work in giving us insights into what all of that data is going to, literally a peek into the future, if you will. So one of their reports stated that 70% of work tasks in offices may be replaced by robotics in various capacities, but that can also mean that it's going to generate new types of work as well. But a lot of that, rather than focusing on, what's going and what's being removed and what's coming, was really more of a conversation about how people are working differently within the workspace, and how in and amongst emerging technology. Mm-hmm. And that regardless of all of this new technology that's coming through, it's still people that underpins all of the work that is happening. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to get lost in that process. And she tied it in with, how people are feeling towards work, about work, the concept of work. So there was some interesting information she provided, which was that, and I think we all intrinsically feel this a little bit, as we're going through seeing 4 generations in the workplace, a large proportion of people now, it's not about working for you. It's not about working for the company. It's about working with you and with the organization in partnership. It's a proper relationship where it's give and take, and there's conversations, there's dialogue, and negotiations about what's happening. It's not this is how it is and this is what you must do, and you do it for me, and it's no longer transactional. And I think that was it's showing a gap between employers that are providing that and not. And we can see that in the other statistic that Kate provided, which was 42% of employees in 2024 said that their workplace does not meet their needs. And I wanted to break that down a little bit and get your thoughts on what you think employees mean by needs, because that's a big concept, right? Like, is it just the needs of, a good working environment, or is it the complexity of the role? Or, in your experience, both of you have so much face time with a lot of different employees and candidates. Leanne, what's your take, and what's the feedback that you're getting in terms of that statistic?
I think the interesting part of when you talk about employees' needs, it is very individualistic. So and generational. So, you can't just have a blanket approach and go, this is what our employees need, because it depends on their personal lives, where they are in their careers. For people that are coming into the industry or coming into the market, they're looking for that growth, that development, that training, that support. They're also looking for work-life balance.
Yeah.
If you're looking at people that are potentially starting to transition out of the workforce, they're still wanting to learn and grow, but they're not looking to be put on a steep trajectory of this is where you're going in the next 5 years. So I think it's very much about talking to your people, having an understanding of what their needs are, and then balancing it out with what the business can offer and give. I think for a lot of people in organizations, they just want to know where the business, where the vision is, what the strategy is. And obviously there's certain things you can share, there's certain things you can't. But being able to take people along with that journey is about having that inclusion, having that sense of belonging, feeling connected to the business and to the people.
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes where organizations potentially lack. They're fine to tell people this is what we need and what we want, but not necessarily about this is how we're going to get there and this is where you're going to contribute, which makes a difference.
I think for us, in terms of the pattern that we're seeing, and yes, it is individual to everyone's situation and what their circumstances are, but I think that the growing request is around the right to disconnect. So we're seeing that this younger generation, Gen Z, is coming in and no longer wanting to work past 5 o'clock. They really want that hard stop at 5 o'clock and go home and to disconnect and not be on their phone and not have to check anything. I think the other thing that we're also seeing is people also wanting a 4-day work week. So they're willing to take a pay cut for those things where people don't want to work. The focus is no longer on work. And I think that some of the older generations are struggling with that concept of, yes, work is still important, but there is also that balance of wanting that disconnect and wanting that flexibility of only working a number of days and getting that productivity that you would in the 5 days. Yeah,
that's really interesting because it really speaks to some of the other points that Kate mentioned, which was, 3 out of 5 Gen Z employees believe work is fundamentally broken, which is huge.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy for people to just slide that under the rug and go, oh, it's because they're entitled, or it's because they just don't want to work hard, and that is the same theme that every generation that's just gone that's said about the generation that's coming, and that's never held true. Every generation has brought something to the party that somebody else hasn't. So it can be really easy for people to go, oh, that's too difficult to deal with, and I can't unpack that properly, and it's just because you're entitled. But I don't think that that's true at all. I have very strong opinions about this particular piece, and it can be a little bit controversial, I'll admit, but I do feel that, in many ways, Gen Z are right to feel that way because, we're going through a fundamental shift in how people feel about work. And Kate mentioned this in the type of contracts we hold towards work. And that doesn't mean the employee contract. So, the baby boomers had the contract of loyalty with their company. You're loyal to the company and they give you a good salary and you're able to, prosper from that. Millennials were after, and millennials and zillennials, as they say, also like the Gen X. I don't want to forget Gen X. Everyone seems to pass them over. I'm so sorry. But we were all about engagement and wanting that fulfillment and, I need to feel like I'm learning something new, etc. And that was what we wanted out of that relationship. And that contract is now shifting where Gen Z are all about being energized. And I think there's this misconception that their need to disconnect, as you were saying, Kaajal, is about laziness. But I think it's also about the fundamental understanding of, if you want me to bring the best version of myself to your organization, then I need to have some of that best version of myself to take home for my family.
Yeah.
And if you want the best version of me, then I need the best version of you. I can't be giving you all my best version and you give me mediocrity and an unfulfilling work environment, or a poorly thought out job design or something like that. And I think there is merit in that attitude. And honestly, I could probably do another entire episode based on breaking that down. But I do want to mention one thing before we move on to another different speaker, which I thought was really interesting. Because all of this, centers around, okay, well, what can we do more as a business and what can we offer? And it all spins back to pay, I think. Not just pay. There's lots of other facets, but that's a core component. And one thing I want to leave here for any of our viewers to think about if they're in positions that can influence this is, rather than purely focusing on am I paying right for the job? Think about what is our pay philosophy as a business. And I think that ties in with when, you know, businesses go on that journey of building an EVP, or like a value system or a brand system, which is, yes, each job is very, very different, and each has its own components, but ultimately there are some overarching values that will govern all of us, irrespective of where you sit. And I think if you take that approach for how you pay people, that will ultimately answer a lot of questions that people might have. All right. Next one, which was absolutely, I felt dazzled by this person. I think we all did. I think we all had this moment of like, oh my God, she's just brilliant and intelligent, and just was fantastic on the floor. And her name was Dr. Catherine Ball, and she is an honorary associate professor of cybernetics at ANU. I mean, God, what a title. Just so cool. And she had a session called Beauty and the Beast, and it was all about us humans now moving into the fifth age of industry. You know, we had the 4 edges before us, which was the conveyor belts and everything else that, you know, computers and things that just basically pushed us forward in our industrial journey. And we're now facing the fifth one with emerging technology that, you know, she feels will actually allow us to be more human. Now, it's really interesting because we all had AI and emerging tech and everything else thrown in our faces left, right, and centre, all in the context of how it's going to impact your work and how it's going to be positive and how it's going to change things. And she came in and scared the living daylights out of me. She gave us a real reality check, and in a good way. So the real question, is tech predator or prey? How do we feel about it after that session?
I think it was such a fresh perspective as to what we'd heard throughout the conference and the different sessions we'd been in. I think it is something that it's going to add tremendous value. It's going to help streamline a lot of processes. It's going to help us work smarter. But I think the mindset also needs to be that looking at the compliance, managing risks correctly, making, you know, looking at where your data goes, what data is going into it. Which is talking about things like biometrics, and you know, you no longer need to have your head. They can now figure out who you are, looking at your body, how you walk,
the back of your hands,
looking at your beauty spots on the back of your hands.
Yes.
And I was like,
the way that you walk.
Do you cover up and just bubble wrap yourself so no one can figure it out? So it was just
from walking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think it's really dependent on how it's used, when it's used, and the back end of it, making sure that it's safe. Looking at things like where the data is going, and as she says, when you look at technology, it's not necessarily. We've always talked about artificial intelligence, it's physical intelligence, because the information that's going into the system is based on people.
Yes.
It's the information we're feeding into it. So it's learning from people. So it's still that human aspect to it, which I thought was really good. But yeah, it was a really good session. Made you think.
Yes. Yeah.
I definitely agree with most of what Leanne said in terms of it was a good session. It was an eye-opener in terms of what we learnt and taking things into consideration. But I think that also the piece around we actually don't know enough information. It is such an unknown. Although we're talking about AI and implementing it into our businesses, we actually don't know the full capacity of what this system could do, because it's not regulated. In Australia. In other countries it is regulated, but in Australia it's not. So we don't know what that looks like and where it will end up and what impact it will have until we find out more information.
And I think you know, she made a very interesting point about there's such a focus on AI strategy. And she just ripped it to shreds and said, you don't need an AI strategy, you just need your business strategy. And she gave such a great analogy, which is a carpenter doesn't need a hammer strategy. AI is the same thing. It's a tool. You have your business strategy, you focus on how that tool is incorporated into your business. And just as with any other tool, you know, the hammer, is the handle broken? Is it going to be able to do the job that it needs to do? Does it need a servicing? Do you need to buy a new one? Do you need to improve it? You know, same sorts of questions to be applied to AI, but obviously far more robust because, and I think, Kaajal, what you mentioned about we are looking at just the teeny tiny tip of the iceberg. And while we're so excited, it's not that we need to be fearful about these things. It's just that we need to be mindful that we don't know. And it's that awareness of going, I don't even know what I don't know.
Exactly.
That's how far, I think there was that beautiful concept of learning where, and I won't try to repeat it because I can't remember the full extent of it, but you know, you go through that learning journey of you don't know what you don't know, and then you get to a phase of you know what you don't know, but you still don't know it, and then you sort of develop from that in terms of you know what you need to know and all, and so on and so forth until you know everything. But we are so far, like, you know, at the start of that journey, and we need to be very, very mindful. And I do want to mention that that little slogan that she told us at the end, which just rings so true. And this was actually, I think, IBM's slogan from back in the day, which is, a computer can never be held accountable. Therefore, a computer must never make a management decision. And I think if we as you know, leaders who are implementing these tools at a rapid rate can keep that as the underpinning guideline, it should never be held accountable for. It can't be held accountable for anything. Therefore, it should never be making a final decision for you, and you can never use that as a scapegoat ever. Yeah. Amazing. I would 100% go to and listen to her for another 2 hours if I could. She was just wonderful. Now, I want to spend some time on this next hot topic because everybody is just dying to understand it better if you're in the HR world. And as soon as I say what this topic is, anybody that's even remotely connected to HR will be like, please tell me more. And that is the future of working from home and flexible working options in Australia. So we were fortunate enough to go to essentially an open panel discussion between 3 different people. One was, you know, from was a researcher. One was from HWL Lawyers, an employment lawyer, and one was head of HR from an organisation that was actually a frontline organisation. So they had employees that were, you know, head office, but also, you know, very much have to be present at work. So a great test case essentially for any changes that have come through. Now, there was a lot of stats in that, which I do want to take some time to cover through because I think it's important. And then I also want to talk about some of the advice that was given to us and the experiences that we've had around it as well. So as it stands, and these statistics are based on organisations that are registered with AHRI and participate in these events and organisations and the surveys that AHRI hold. So 72% of the AHRI organisations have a hybrid working model at present, which is quite a significant proportion. Also unsurprising, I feel. I think a lot of people are moving in that direction with that's 1 or 2 days working from home, etc. 63% of those organisations agree that the hybrid model is significantly used as a talent attraction and talent retention measure. Also unsurprising. It is the hot topic and everybody wants it now. And very interestingly, 17% of those organisations are trialling a 4-day working week. So I would have actually expected that percentage to be smaller. And it's very interesting to see that more people are hopping on this, at least the trial, just to really explore whether it's going to work for them. What I would like to know, and we didn't get a chance to ask this question, is what industries they're in. I'd be very curious to get an understanding. But I imagine that they're not going to be predominantly frontline just yet. I could be wrong. I'm making assumptions here or inferences, but it would be interesting to know. But nonetheless, 17%, that's a great number. So some of the things that I want to share with you that we've learnt now, or changes that are happening at the moment. So as of 2023, you'd all be aware that the Fair Work Act was changed to strengthen employees' abilities to request for flexible working arrangements, including working from home, and also strengthen the obligations that an employer holds to managing that request. So, you know, it was made very clear that an employer has to actually have a consultative approach and negotiation process. You know, it could be that you're just happy to accept it, and that's great. But if you're not, you've got 21 days to have that process. And to be very clear, you have 21 days to have that process and give an outcome. You can't just go, the negotiation process is taking too long and extend it. You actually have to give an outcome. And that outcome has to have a very detailed justification as to why it would negatively impact the business, and also provide detailed information about the employee's options to dispute. So similar to how we, manage terminations, etc., and give fair work information statements, etc., that is now the obligation for employers as well. So, Kaj, I'm going to pass to you because I know you've got a wealth of experience managing these sorts of requests. Have you seen a distinct increase in these requests? What's been your perspective in how they've been managed? And do you think that this is going to negatively impact industries in any way?
There definitely has been a rise.
Yes.
There has been a rise of flexible working arrangements. A lot of businesses have been, a lot of our businesses that we work with have also been hesitant towards this change because it's something different. So the requests are coming through from employees for various different reasons, and it's no longer having to be a medical reason. That's something that we need to also take into consideration. Is it could just be because they need to pick up their child or whatever it may be, but the obligations that we have is to take those things into consideration. But when we are providing reasons as to why, and one of the key things that we like to use and businesses like to say is, oh, but this is an in-office role. And that's all they say, but there's no evidence that we provide to that. And that was one of the key takeaways from the session was you need to start building that evidence around why is this an in-office job? Why is that person required to be on site? And providing those details will actually strengthen and help your organisation respond to these inquiries. And it's not always one, you don't have to have say yes to everybody. It is based on the individual and based on the circumstances, then you respond. So just because you've said to somebody yes and think, oh, I've got to now give it to the rest of the team, you don't. It's you think about the business impact and then you make those decisions. But I think what was really important from that is the response piece. Is many businesses just tend to go no, and just a flat out no. I think really providing the justification and the reasons and the evidence behind it will strengthen your response, but it also builds a lot of trust and engagement from the employee because you've taken the time to explain why. They might not understand. They like to know why. So I think that would really help. And then obviously you've got your obligations from Fair Work, and then you've got the option to, if you cannot come to an agreement, that you can go to Fair Work and you can have a conciliator help to mediate that decision for you.
Yeah, fantastic. And Leanne, have you seen anything come from your end in terms of candidate requests when they're going for new roles, etc.? Is that like a becoming more of a expectation?
I think it's a mixed bag when you sort of look at it. I'm finding in terms of the market, especially because I specialize in the HR space, is more and more HR are being in office more often. There's definitely in certain sectors, certain roles where there is more of a request coming through. It's not always just about that hybrid work week. It's about flexibility as well. So that early start, early finish.
Exactly.
Changing, when they jump on, if they can take an hour in between so they can go and pick up children and then log back on at home in the afternoon. So they're looking at flexibility as a whole. I'm finding in the market that, 18, 24 months ago when I was talking to people and you'd say to me, what are you looking for, flexible and hybrid work arrangement? Is it a deal breaker? It was. Whereas now it's still important and it's still requested, but it's not as much of a deal breaker. It depends on what the rest of the package, what the company offers, that kind of thing is added into it. But we are seeing more people looking at that as a blended work week to have work-life balance.
Yes.
Potentially not necessarily a hybrid or flexibility, but that work-life balance is important for people.
That's a really important piece, isn't it? Because one thing that became very clear is this is such new territory. I mean, it feels like it's been going on for a while. And, one of the comments that they made was that we were already on this path. We were already on this path. COVID just expedited it, right? And so because it's happened so quickly, we haven't had the usual time to slowly evolve and adjust. And some might say that that's a good thing because sometimes you need a good kick in the pants to for something to come to fruition. But both of you made very interesting points in the sense of, I think employers don't get trapped into this thing of flexibility must be working from home. It isn't. And because we're so early on, we don't have all the options that might be available to us. We should be approaching this with curiosity, because someone, somewhere, an employee, if you are having a genuine consultation with them, might actually suggest something that's really useful and could be implemented quite easily. You know, we are motivated, intrinsically, we're all motivated by very unique things. There are some things that are very common, obviously, but, you know, there are things that I think we need to just be very open-minded about it and go, let's go into this consultation. What you're asking for, we might not be able to give. But can you go away and think about some other options? We might try to think about something too. Can we meet in the middle? I think those are the types of negotiations you should be having, rather than going, we can't give that. Sorry.
Yep.
You know, that's not a negotiation.
Yeah.
That's not a conversation or a dialogue. And I think, Kaajal, what you were saying about, you know, having that justification, it also asks the employer to take a look at exploring, do we need to be doing the things exactly the way that we're doing them? Yes, change is hard. And I'm not sitting here saying that, yeah, you know, just make a seismic shift to the way your business operates. Like, I know that is also delusional, really. You know, you've got to take baby steps in those things. But you'd be amazed at what you can do in the interim to go, look, this really at this stage, it's not feasible in this scenario, but can we slightly adjust?
Yeah.
You know? And we've got so many businesses who pride themselves on innovation and future thinking and technology. Well, this is innovation in a different way.
Yeah. Correct.
And I think, you know, I feel really strongly on this point where, for better, for worse, flexibility is here. We've opened Pandora's box, and human psyche is that you can't go back to that now. We can't close the box and go, shh, it was never there.
Yeah.
No one talk about it. No. We know, we've experienced it, we've lived, it's a lived experience. And I think the businesses who are smart, the businesses who are innovative, the businesses who pride themselves on being able to, you know, create a solution for a problem outside of the box, are the people who will work out what benefits can we give that will promote flexibility, whether that's working from home, whether that's something else, whether it's job sharing, whether it's the 4-day, whatever it might be. That's the innovation piece I think we're sitting at now.
Yeah.
And someone's going to figure it out, and they are going to go from 0 to 100.
Correct.
And everybody else that's forcing it to go back to the way it was is going to be left behind. That's my opinion. I could be proven wrong, but we'll see. But I think that's going to be a pretty interesting space to watch. But before we move on to our final piece, I want to talk through some changes, or I should say propositions that are being put in by government bodies, or the Greens, for example, as well, Victoria government, that I think is quite relevant to what we're talking about. So Victoria government is trying to legislate a 2 days working from home as mandatory, which is very interesting on a state level. I don't know. I think we all got the feeling from the panel that might be a little bit hard to achieve, but watch this space. But one thing that they thought might actually get through is what the Greens have proposed, which is legislating that the right to request flexible working arrangements be extended beyond its current parameters. So right now it's, you know, primary care duties, over 55, disability, all those sorts of things. And they want this to be available to everybody. And I think, you know, they might actually get some traction from what we were hearing on the panel, which is very interesting. And I think, you know, it's a sign of the times that everybody wants a piece of this pie, and that, you know, Gen Z, the future generation in the next, you know, 10, 15 years will be stepping into their own managerial roles. They want that work-life balance. So, you know, watch that space for sure. But I think the couple of things that I want to highlight for any employers that are watching and tuning in is, be mindful of your justifications. Be aware that if you have a blanket policy about flexibility, you can't use that as a justification to just say no if their request falls outside of that. Needs to be assessed on an individual case-by-case basis. The flip side of that is, if you offer a flexibility arrangement to somebody and one of their peers in the same team, in the same role, they equally can't turn around and say, well, I'm entitled to the exact same thing, because their circumstance, it's very unlikely that two people are going to have the exact same requirements or the exact same things in their personal life that for a request of flexibility. So, again, as the blanket policy approach doesn't work in that regard, the blanket policy approach for giving everybody the same type of flexibility in the team is also not, the onus isn't there on you for that. And, be mindful, be creative, be open to suggestions, I think is the key takeaway. And be willing to have a genuine conversation with your employee, because if you have that, even if the answer is ultimately no, you've given them the trust, you'll have a conversation. Yeah. Right. We've talked a lot about things that we can do for our teams, for our employees, for our organizations. And the last session that we went to was about what we can do for us as HR professionals, because my goodness, we've got to do it all. With a private investigator one day and a counsellor the other, and all the HR work in between. We've got a lot on our plates, and it was really great to end with a session that spoke about what can we do for us. And we had none other than the amazing Maz Farrelly to talk us through that. If you don't know Maz Farrelly, her punchline, I think, on her LinkedIn is, "I've been inside your home," which is just amazing. And that's because she is a wonderful, amazing TV producer who's done the likes of Big Brother and Farmer Wants a Wife and X Factor, and just, some of the most watched television programs, both in the UK and Australia. So, yes, she has been inside your home at one point or another, but she was phenomenal. I'm sure you'd both agree. But I just wanted to flick over to you and because there was a lot that she went through about essentially how to unbore your business and how to unbore yourself. And there's so much that we could cover, but I just want to hear the one amazing thing that you could take away from that. Leanne and Kaj, what was the winning moment for you? I know there were so many, but
we probably have the same, where she had this slogan that came up, and it was, "It's not my job to be interested in you, it's your job to be interesting."
I know.
And it just made us really think. I don't know if that was the moment for you, but
it was savage, wasn't it?
It was savage. I felt
it kind of made me just go,
and then she was talking about, to have people look at your LinkedIn, and if your line is talking about the words passionate and really enthusiastic and a people person,
unprecedented.
And yes, she was like, "They're just boring." She's like, "I would not even talk to you. I would go say, I need to go get a coffee." So,
I think her line was, "I'd need to go get plastic surgery so you'd never see me again."
Yes. Brilliant.
She's just brutal, right? Yeah. And what was yours, Leanne?
I think there were a couple of things that sort of stood out for me. I love the fact when she was talking about doing things differently. She showed us all those adverts for companies that, we're all doing the same sort. If you're looking at a car company, it's, going down the windy road and about their
since 1988 and since 1957, all starting the same way.
And then she brought up the advert, which was, funny enough, around COVID and going in for testing, and it was done in South Africa, and it was just so different to the rest, where you actually sort of got engaged and you sat and listened to the whole thing. And talking about with all the shows that she's done, if you don't get the audience's attention within 30 seconds, you've lost them, they don't come back.
Yeah.
And it's the same in business. If you're going into pitch, you've got to go in and be creative. I'm not saying be cringe, but go in and be creative, be a standout, do something different, but add the value. If you're going to say you're going to do something, do it. But I think just her whole approach, and look, I loved her sense of humor. I can align to that quite easily, but just doing that something different, being that standout.
Yeah, because she hit the nail on the head, which is, if you're giving the same thing as everybody else, she just flat out called us boring. It was painful, but it was true.
And become white noise.
Exactly. And she said, you have to make a fool of yourself in order to find something different, because genius doesn't come from safety or comfortability in that creative space, right? Like you've got to do something silly sometimes. And it's as simple as, if someone I think she did that interesting take of where she made us read the bio of some fantastic, I think it was another TV producer or something, right? And like, legitimately a fantastic producer in their own right. And she listed some of the credentials, which were outstanding. And then we read the bio before she, helped to create something new and amazing. And we read it, and then when she asked, okay, but what did it say? And I couldn't remember a damn word. And she's right. I think, and I had to sort of look at my own LinkedIn and go, is anyone going to remember anything after they've actually read something? So that's my homework to myself. And she gave a really good phrase for it, which is, what is your Netflix ad?
Yes.
Because she, with all these amazing shows that she's produced that, she'll get given $30 million to produce it, and she's got 30 seconds to sell it.
Yes.
And each second is worth $1 million. So every single word has to count. And I think that's a perfect way of going, you've got this little space that you can sell yourself on whether it's LinkedIn or whatever platform you're using. Are you going to just waste it with, I'm a passionate XYZ? Like, I feel like I'm falling asleep as I've just said it to myself now. And I think that's the homework that I'm going to give to myself. But it was very confronting that it's not her job to be interested.
Yeah.
And she is spot on. If we are a business and we've got something to offer, it's not our client's responsibility to be interested. It's not our candidate's responsibility to necessarily be interested. We need to be providing something.
We need to make our own noise.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Leanne Lazarus, Kaajal Khelawan, thank you so much for joining me today in our special edition episode of Ahead of the Curve. And thank you so much for joining us online. We'll be providing some details at the end of this for all of our contact details if you need to reach out. But thanks so much for joining in, and I'll see you next time.